Oh, wow, what is
Okay, we're
amazing
back.
start of our event. Super happy to have Jed with us again back. He's back with us again. So yeah, hi Jed.
What's up, William? How's it going?
Doing well. I'm a big fan of you. You know that, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, Jed is I would say probably one of the youngest SDRs I've ever met. I guess you have started your career at age of 17, right?
I did, yep. At high school.
Oh yeah, cool. So actually, yeah, before we get started with the topic, thanks for your previous questions. We go through all of them. We mark the best ones. So yeah, keep asking relevant questions, and we will pick up the best one and ask Jed at the end of his panel. So yeah, Jed, I guess you can get started with your presentation and share us your very best things on and tips on relevant outreach at scale, which is my like
Yeah,
favorite topic.
awesome. Yeah, happy to share. Let's jump into it. All right. Share screen. All right. Can you see my screen, William?
Yep. Okay.
Awesome. All right, cool. Yeah, so I appreciate the introduction. My name is Jed Mahrle. I'm an SDR manager over at Pandadoc. I've been here for about 2 years. I joined as like an MDR, very entry level role right out of high school. Quickly joined the Outbound SDR team and then began managing the team at the beginning of this year, scaled the team from about 3 SDRs to now a little bit over 20. So it's been pretty fun. On the side, I also run like a newsletter. It's called Practical Prospecting, where I share prospecting tips, things that I'm working on, and a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing today. I go in a lot more depth on my newsletter, so you can check it out, look at the archives, and kind of go more in depth there. And again, a lot of the stuff I'm going to be sharing is stuff that I use to help me become a successful SDR, and a lot of the stuff my team is using today as well. Um, Unfortunately, I will not be talking about cold FaceTimes today. I'm sure some of you wanted to hear about that, but that is a top secret thing that I will not be sharing today. But cool, let's jump into it. So part one, and really kind of to give you a background on what this presentation is going to be about. Relevant outbound messaging at scale. So I have I guess a prospecting philosophy that might not align with a lot of other people. I prefer to spend a lot more time on the back end, grouping my contacts and accounts within my territory before I load them into a cadence or a sequence, whatever you call it. And I spend less time on the personalization once that stuff's in the cadence. And the way I think about it is I'm going to spend more time grouping these people up so that the messaging that I send them can be a little bit more automated because it sounds very specific to them because I did a good job of grouping them up. So part one, I'll kind of talk to you about how I do this and some strategies behind that. So the first way is using triggers. You might have heard of this term before. It's not necessarily anything new, but I use Sales Navigator to identify different types of triggers. These are 5 of probably my favorite ones. There's plenty of them out there. There's different things that'll work for different companies, and depending on what you sell, who you sell to, and where you sell in. But as far as identifying triggers, like I said, I kind of go into the how-to of doing that on my newsletter, but I'll just talk to you about what these triggers are and what they mean. So the first one is new leadership. So just prospecting new senior leaders in a role. And so when I was an SDR, I was looking at a lot of the inbound data of inbound leads that were coming to us for like demo requests, free trials, things like that. And a large majority of them were people who were like 3 to 9 months in their role. So I kind of noticed a trend. And I mean, this isn't anything super surprising when somebody joins a new company, especially in a leadership role. They're going to be looking for ways to kind of mix things up, potentially add new software and kind of put their stamp on the company. I know it happened specifically at my company when our VP of sales joined earlier this year. We bought a whole bunch of new software. We were mixing a lot of things up. So I like to target those people specifically, and I can come at them with very specific messaging that sounds specific to them because they're new in their role. And I know more than likely they're going to be a little bit more open to hearing about Pandadoc, my company, as opposed to just a completely cold contact or account. The second one is my favorite one. It's actually really easy to do. It's customer alumni. So people who used to work for your customers, but now they're in a decision-making role somewhere else. There's a really easy way to do this with Sales Navigator, and it's really fun because it works for two reasons. A, they either used your product at their last company, so they're very familiar with you already, or B, maybe they didn't use your product in their last company, but the fact that you worked with their previous employer is enough social proof to get them to at least have a conversation with you, right? And that's the whole goal of this, is you're trying to just increase those reply rates and increase the chances of them at least having a conversation with you, giving a referral to somebody else in the account. But customer alumni is super fun. I really like doing that one. The next one is recent department growth. So if you're like me and you sell to salespeople, I like to look using Sales Navigator for companies with a large growth percentage in the sales department. If you sell to HR people, look for HR department growth, or so on. IT people, same thing. There's a really easy way to do this. And of course, when people are growing a team, there's growing pains that come with that. Oftentimes they're looking for new software. Again, I know this happened at my company when we scaled quite a bit over the last couple of years. So these are really good people to target. The biggest thing I'll say here is this is pretty popular. There's probably a million other SDRs reaching out to that same company for the same reason. So be specific with your messaging. Don't reach out and say, hey, I noticed you guys grew a ton over the last quarter. Be specific. Like say, hey, I know you guys went from 4 account executives to 8 in the last month. And that's going to help you set yourself apart from a lot of those other SDRs reaching out. The next one is executive first degree connects. So this is in Sales Navigator, you can see who's connected with your executive team. So I like doing this for my CEO specifically. I'll reach out to people who I see are connected to him, and I'll reach out and say, hey, I noticed you're connected with my CEO or my CRO or whatever. And oftentimes these people maybe had like a business relationship in the past, or they've seen your CEO's content, or they just know of him. And that's going to kind of open up more conversations just because of the familiarity. And again, it's better than just reaching out to somebody who's completely cold. And then the last piece, I don't necessarily use Sales Navigator for this. I actually use Zoom Info and some other tools, but there's other ways of finding this as well. It's just grouping triggers by a process or a tool they're using. So if I know they're using a common competitor of mine, I can make the messaging around that competitor. I can say, hey, I know that this competitor doesn't do these things that we do, and I can put that in the email. Another good way to find like what tools and processes people are using is sales operations leaders tend to put in the tools that they've brought into the company in their job description. And so you can often find like a good amount of information there, figure out what tools they're using, and use that to customize your messaging. So like I said, there's tons of different triggers. These are the main ones I use. I'm going to kind of dive into how I structure those emails and how I use these triggers to have obviously relevant outbound messaging. Cool. So structuring your emails. So I try to stick to this formula for pretty much every email I send. It's very simple. The first line of every email is always the context. So this is where I put in any information about the trigger. So, hey, I noticed you used to work for this company. They're a customer of ours. Or congrats on the new role with this company. Or notice you guys added X amount of AEs in the last quarter. This is the most important line because the preview line drastically affects the open rates of your emails. So I try to make sure that the context for the trigger is really short and sweet, and they're going to see that without even opening their email, and it's going to get them to click on it and read the rest. So that's the first sentence. The second sentence is the value proposition. I try to make it very specific to their pains. So all of my cadences are focused on one persona. And so I try to just focus those emails around their pains, and I try to tie in relevant social proof when I can. So I went into our CRM. I found all of our customers by industry and by geographical location. And then I created a spreadsheet so that when I'm sending out these emails, I can quickly go to that spreadsheet, copy and paste the name of a similar customer, and then tie that social proof into the value proposition. The third line is the call to action. I prefer a soft ask. Some examples are, would you be open to learning more? Worth exploring? Could I send over some more information? I find that the soft ask opens up a little bit more conversations as opposed to like a hard ask where it's, do you have 30 minutes tomorrow or the next day? But what I will say is like for this and everything else I'm going to share today, it depends on like I said earlier, who you sell to, where you're selling, things of that nature. And so there's not like a black and white process for everything. I would suggest that you try this stuff out yourself. I know Gong did like a case study on the soft ask versus the hard ask, but I would just try both of them and see what works for you. In my case, the soft ask worked significantly better. But yeah, that's how I structure pretty much every email I'm sending out. I'm trying to keep it under 50 words. I'm trying to keep it to 3 sentences. And let's look at a couple examples of emails using these triggers. Cool. So the first email example is customer alumni. So again, these are people that used to work for a customer of ours that are now working at a new company. Subject line is your time at past company. The first sentence is just notice your time at past company. Again, it's super short and sweet. They're going to see it in the preview line and they're going to wonder what it's about. Second line is, our value proposition. They're a customer using Pandadoc, yada, yada, yada. You get the point. That's the value prop right there. And then the last piece is worth exploring for company. I try to make it look like it's kind of off the cuff, like I typed it up. I don't want it to look automated. But again, this is not that hard to do, and it's very relevant to the person, right? Like I'm specifically sending this email to that person, not 100 other people. So the idea here is it takes very little time to send this email out, but it's really impactful, and the reply rates are really high. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but at the top here, whenever I'm sending out an email, I try to do it in like a cluster or a burst or whatever you want to call it of other touch points. So anytime I send out an email, we're going to connect with them on LinkedIn or just view their profile or give them a call, leave a voicemail. So that way, they're going to see Jed Mahrle left a voicemail, gave you a call, sent an email. They're going to see my name 3 times in a really short time period, which is going to give me a higher chance of getting my email opened and getting a response. The next example is new leadership. So again, these are people that just recently joined a new leadership role at a new company. The subject line I like to use, and you can try different ones as well, is just from previous company to current company. Emails, congrats on the new role with company. Again, the value proposition, it's a question and then, referencing a customer. And then can I send over some more info to see if we could help? I've included kind of like an email example that I got a meeting from using this. Again, really simple, doesn't take that long to send out, but it looks customized and it gets the job done. So I mean, that's pretty much what all the triggers emails kind of look like. They're very similar. It's always that first line that's just a little bit different though. Cool. So we talked about grouping your contacts, grouping your accounts, how to do that efficiently so you can quickly send those emails out without spending a ton of time. The second part is for the relevant outbound messaging is how to warm up those accounts and get even more personalized as you're working through the cadence and working through the accounts or sequence, if you call it that. So part 2, warming up your accounts. I'm going to share 2 strategies that I use to kind of warm up my accounts. The first one is the bottoms up approach. I go really in depth on this in one of my newsletter archives where I kind of talk about the whole cadence structure. But if you sell to salespeople, you're in luck for sure because salespeople like to help other salespeople out. But same applies for if you sell to HR, to IT, reach out to people who are at the ground level. Their inbox isn't as full. They're going to be more likely to answer your questions. And I try to keep the messaging really simple. Like if it's a salesperson, I'll just say, hey, salesperson, was just curious if you see any problems with this process. I want to see if I can help you. Or what are you guys using for this? Honestly, the reply rates are ridiculously high because, like I said, they're not getting reached out to. You're not asking for a meeting. You're just asking for some information to potentially make their lives easier. And this is just an example of an SDR or an account executive, that I reached out to on LinkedIn. He gave me some information, reached out to their CFO, and then ended up booking a meeting, and we closed the deal a few weeks later. A lot of the stuff that I talk about in this presentation is trying to get the maximum amount of results with the least amount of effort. And so this is a really good example of that. Anytime you're reaching out to an account, you can grab a whole bunch of ICs or individual contributors, load them into basically just an automated cadence. And then anytime you get a response, you take that little bit of information you got and you plug that into your emails and your phone calls with the decision makers. This is a little bit off topic, but if you notice in the PS right here, I kind of put some personalization. I'm a big Raptors fan. And I noticed that she was kind of into basketball, and she lived in Toronto. So I just put a little PS there about the personalization. I am not a fan of leading with personalization that's not relevant. So I wouldn't lead with that in my email. I think it's a little, in my opinion, and I think everybody has different opinions about this, but I think it's a little bit tacky to try to lead with that. And then, I could spend all the time in the world trying to tie that into Pandadoc's value proposition. But if I have something that I want to at least personalize on that level, I'll put it in the PS. Typically, it gets higher response rates, makes me look a little bit more human. But if I can't tie that personalization into the value proposition. I'm not going to spend 10, 15 minutes trying to figure out how to do that. I'm just going to put it in the PS, and it tends to get the job done. All right. The next one is snowball prospecting. I actually just sort of touched on this in the panel we just had. But again, I have a newsletter that goes really in depth on this. But, snowball prospecting is basically the idea of you get information from one person, then you go to the next person, get some more information. And it's kind of like the snowball effect, right? It's not necessarily a new idea, but this is something that helps me a ton as an SDR, and I try to teach my team as well. So to give you an example, let's say I call a CRO, she hangs up on me, or maybe I emailed her instead and she just replied, not interested, right? So a lot of SDRs might take that hang up or that not interested reply and do nothing with it. They'll archive the email, they'll move on from the lead. But I take that as ammo I can use, right? So now when I go to call the VP of sales, I can open with, hey, Mr. Prospect, I was in touch with your CRO. Would you be the person who handles X? Right? I'm not lying. I'm not saying, we had a great conversation. She referred me to you, all these things. I'm just saying I was in touch with them. If it was an email that she said not interested, we were in touch. We communicated. If she hung up on me, we communicated. But it makes you sound a little bit more like you know what you're doing, like you're really researching the account, and you're being a little bit more relevant, right? That's the idea here. You're not just reaching out to people with no reason. And then let's say the VP of sales says, yeah, I'm not the right person. We use competitor name. It's great. You go to somebody laterally, or you go to the director of sales and you say, hey, I've spoken with the CRO, the VP of sales there. They've told me that you're using this competitor right now. Wanted to reach out to see if you were in charge of this at all. So that's a big thing that I try to do whenever I'm working an account. You got to keep pretty detailed account notes on all the people you've talked to. But leverage those hangups, leverage those like really short conversations and those not interested replies, and always lead with them in your phone calls, because it's going to reduce the chance of them hanging up on you right away. They're going to want to hear a little bit more what it's about, and it gives you more time to like make your pitch and actually have a conversation on the phone. But again, I've made this mistake so many times. I was kind of an idiot back in the day, and I would kind of like fabricate what had happened, and then people would get pissed off at me, and I would lose a couple deals because of that. So don't make the mistake I did. I'm sure a lot of SDRs have, but yeah. So the bottoms up approach, snowball prospecting, those are two things that I would recommend you kind of implement to your strategy while you're working these accounts. And then again, you're just looking for little bits and pieces of information to then tie into your emails and your phone calls and make them a little bit more relevant. All right, last part 3 is the cadence and sequence structure. I think there's a lot of complexities that go into how you structure your cadence. Again, depending on who you're selling to, if it's inbound, if it's outbound, I'm actually testing this constantly a lot. But the main thing that I try to do here is I send 3 separate email threads over the course of typically 2 to 3 weeks. So 9 emails in total throughout a cadence. And each new email thread is focused on a new pain point, right? And then there's a bump email and another bump email. We'll talk about bump emails in a second. I know there's some controversy around that. There's some data. I'll talk about my opinion, but I'll discuss that after this slide. So the first email, it follows that same structure, right? Context, value prop, call to action. But I only focus on one pain point at a time, and there's 2 reasons why I do this. The first one is attention span, right? So if my first email, I say, hey, we help with XYZ for ABZ companies, and we do all this stuff, right? They're going to read that and just see a big blurb of words and not really consume anything. So I try to keep it really specific, like one bullet, right? We help with this thing, and then I'll bump the email. I'll bump it again. If they're not responding, I'll assume that pain point isn't relevant. The second reason is to keep your cadence relevant across several weeks. So if you kind of put all your eggs in one basket on that first email, you explain everything you do, then it's like, what more do you have to say for the rest of your cadence? What more are you going to tie into your emails, right? So it makes sure that every time you're sending a new email, you're offering something new that you didn't already say in that first email. So I focus on one pain point. And like I said earlier, all my cadences are persona specific. So if your marketing team hasn't helped you identify this, one way I did it was just look into the CRM for that vertical and that persona and see with your current customers, why do those people come inbound? Why do they purchase your software or whatever you're selling in the first place? And just try to find the common pain points, the common themes, and then use those 3 pain points for your cadence. We talked about this earlier. Every time I'm doing a touch point, I'm trying to do it within like a verse. So if I make a call, I'm sending an email and also doing a LinkedIn touch. I pretty much always try to do that just to give myself the best chance of being seen and getting a response. All right, so let's talk about bump emails. There's been some data saying that I've heard lots of different things. And again, I'll say it again, like anytime you hear like a prospecting tip or whatever, like don't take it at face value. Try it out for yourself. You got to see what works for you. Don't just take what I'm doing and assume it's the right way, because obviously this stuff can be improved. But I've seen a lot of success from it, right? And so the idea of a bump email is to just send something that doesn't necessarily have any new value, but you're just trying to give your first email a second chance of being looked at. And another kind of philosophy behind the bump email is that I'm just trying to get to a yes or a no as soon as possible, right? If I get a yes, that's great. Obviously, if I get a no, a lot of conversations start at no, or at least I can nurture that lead and then follow up with them every few months and try to turn that into a meeting later on. But if I'm spending all this time trying to provide a ton of new value with each email and trying to personalize every single email I send out, oftentimes people just aren't going to respond. And I spent all that time and I didn't even get a no. And I'd rather have a no than just no response. So that's a big reason why I'm using these bump emails. They're usually just one sentence. A few examples are any thoughts on this first name? That's obviously a pretty popular one. Or would insert another contact's name be a better person to get in touch with about this? I really like this one because you're not just asking for a referral. It's not, is there somebody better to get in touch with? And it takes like 2 seconds to create the email. You just go into the account, find another person that you think would be good to get in touch with, and then just insert their name into the sentence. And oftentimes they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead and reach out to them. Or the fact that I actually did the work of trying to find somebody else, they'll say, no, actually, that's not the person, but here's who you can reach out to instead. Or they'll just straight up say no, right? And that's still good in my opinion, because at least I'm getting an answer. But I like that one a lot. Another one is if you just call somebody, you can send an email saying, hey, I just gave you a ring at insert mobile number. Would it make sense to discuss this with you? When somebody sees their mobile number in the preview line of an email, I've got pretty high open rates from that and response rates because they're like, why? You know, it's clearly not just automated necessarily. You put their mobile number in there, they're going to check and listen to your voicemail potentially. A few other ideas are just putting in images or GIFs. I'm a big fan of using GIFs in my emails. Content or case studies from your marketing team. Videos, bumping initial emails with a video to kind of recap it. Or one that I really like is like, if I just called somebody, I'll just resend my most recent email, add no additional content, but just change the subject line to just called to try to kind of get that email in front of them once again. These are some bump examples that set meetings. This one was literally just thoughts. Oops. Another one was a meme or a GIF, or not a GIF, a meme that I used. I like this one for rev ops people and sales ops people. Feel free to steal that if you want to, but I really liked it. Yeah, so those are just some examples. Cool. Looks like we're about 21 minutes in, so we might finish a little bit early. I know we started a little bit early, but the last piece is subject line ideas. So again, like you're putting all these work in your emails. I think subject lines are extremely important. They're the easiest thing to A/B test. You just create a new email, but just change the subject line. So any email you're sending out, I would always recommend A/B testing the subject lines. And also keep in mind, right, I might share these subject lines with you guys today. They're not necessarily completely groundbreaking new subject lines, but if you keep using the same one over and over, people are going to catch on and it's going to stop working. So you constantly have to evolve these and come up with new ones. But I like a few examples are customizing to the tools or processes they're using. So we talked about this as one of the triggers. If I know they're using a competitor, I'll literally call that out in the subject line, your competitor name contract, or using competitor question mark. Customize the person, how many years have they been with the company, or like the new leadership one from previous company to current company. If you're doing the recent department growth, you can just, X% growth in Y months, or 8 new account executives over the last 2 months. Again, that's really personalized. If you're using the Snowball prospecting method, I like using this one a lot. Anytime I have a not interested reply or a call connect, every other email I'm sending to that account is spoke with people at company. I'm not saying their name because I don't want to call them out, but I'll say that in the subject line of an email, and people are opening it and it comes across as a little bit more relevant. Yeah, so that's a pretty good one. And then the other ones are for more low priority accounts or maybe automated emails later in this Cadence sequence. So if I just left a voicemail, I'll just change the last email to my voicemail or just called. Company inquiry, or even just something as simple as inquiry has got us like 40% open rates. Sometimes you don't have to be that creative. Just one word subject lines tend to do the trick sometimes if that first preview line is pretty relevant. Even just company name, sometimes actually quite a bit, we use Pandadoc as the subject line, or just like a pain point, for example. So those are some good ideas. You'll notice that a lot of these are like lowercase, for example, or abbreviated, and you might have seen that in some of my email examples as well. Again, I'm trying to not seem automated. I'm trying to make it look like I typed it off the cuff. So all this is intentional. I'll use lower cases. A lot of people won't like this, and I think it might depend on who you're selling to. I feel like with salespeople or marketing people, it's a little bit more acceptable. But I might throw in just some typing errors or typos. And again, there's different opinions on that, but they've worked for me and it helps me stand apart and helps me not look like I am a robot. But I think that's it. So I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate the opportunity. And I think, William, we might have some questions as well.
And thank you, Jed. That was amazing, amazing topic and amazing presentation. Actually, yeah, a few more things here. First of all, yeah, it's a controversial opinions on any thoughts. So yeah, that's cool. Actually, we do also use any sort email, but we try to use it just like you with when we send our very first email, which is highly personalized and highly relevant, just like yours one. And then when we
Yeah,
use any thoughts, we use it just to remind them about our very first personalized email. Maybe they didn't notice it the first
exactly.
time.
Yep.
So yeah, that's why it may work in your case because you just remind them about your personalized email.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We have a few more cool questions here. For example, we had it for a few times, I guess. When do you use when you use your multi touch point approach, like email plus LinkedIn plus phone calls on the same day? How do you organize it? Is it email then LinkedIn then phone call, or what's your best practices over here?
Yeah, it's typically always a phone call first, and then I'll set up the cadence. If it's like a bump email, it can just be automated. I'll set up the automation so that the bump email goes out right after I complete that phone call. So like to be efficient, like I'll make the phone call, and then while I'm on the call, I'll be like viewing their LinkedIn profile, and I might just like their 3 most recent posts or just connect with them or view their profile. And then as soon as I hang up, that automated email gets sent out. So in the time it took me to make a phone call, I did 3 touch points because the automated email went out. I did the LinkedIn touch point while the phone was ringing, and then I made the call.
Cool, cool. Another great question here about best practices. Yeah, they're asking about what is the ideal number of touches in a sequence cadence for you?
Um, well, like I said, so we do like 9 emails, and typically each of those emails comes with another call, and then there's some LinkedIn touches as well. So I'd say like 20 plus, honestly. If they're not
Oh,
opening
wow.
your emails at all and you're not getting through to the phone, then I'm going to remove them from the cadence. But if I'm getting people to continue to open my emails, or the phone is going to their voicemail and it's not getting hung up on right away, then I'm going to keep trying for 16 to 20 touches. I've seen a lot of data as well that like most of the responses come within those first 1 to 3 touches, and then the middle ones, there's typically not a lot of responses. But then for the last like maybe 15 plus touches, there's a
Mm.
surge in reply rates because Florin talked about this earlier on our last panel. Like sometimes they're busy, sometimes they're on vacation, or they've been busy with another project. But if you just kind of consistently are staying in front of them, they're eventually going to get back to you. But yeah, it's typically like the 15 to 20 plus, depending on how engaged that prospect is.
Oh, cool. What about sequence length in terms of days? It's like months, 2 months.
Yeah, definitely not months. I talked about it earlier. I'm trying to get to a yes or no as soon as possible. So, and this might
Mhm.
be controversial as well, but it's worked for us. A lot of times we'll do 1, 2, 3 email, and then we'll give them like a 3 day break, and then we'll do 1, 2, 3. But typically it's like 2 to 3 weeks.
Cool. Cool. Let me see. Maybe we have a few more questions here. Yeah, they're asking about, again, best practices, which is cool. How much time between your emails? I guess you are more aggressive at the very beginning and then less aggressive, right?
Yeah, more aggressive in the beginning for sure, less aggressive as time goes on. And then we'll focus more heavily on the people who've opened our emails more, just by looking at our sales engagement platform to see like who's opening it.
Great. Um, when it comes to personalization at scale, what are your favorite tactics? Are all they like um, connected with your sales LinkedIn Sales Navigator, or maybe use other, for example, tech stack based approach, or your favorite tactics actually?
I mean, my favorite one that I talked on was a customer alumni that gets tons of responses, and they're like probably the warmest people you can target as far as cold outbound. And I still use like if somebody's active on LinkedIn, right? Like that's a big thing. A lot
Mhm.
of people aren't necessarily active on LinkedIn, but if they are active on LinkedIn, they're posting regularly, then I'll try to like tie the email into like what they made a post about. But the biggest thing that I try to stay away from is like making it a hard and fast rule that I have to use for every contact because I've tried that before. And then you end up spending like 15, 20 minutes just trying to figure out how to personalize this email. So I prefer to use the triggers because like when I go to send those emails out, I did the grouping beforehand. I know exactly what I have to do. I don't have to waste time finding personalization. If I do find personalization that makes sense, great. I'll tie it in there and that'll boost the reply rates. But the triggers I identified already are going to do the trick for me for the most part. Um, so yeah, that's the way I think about it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, great. Um, when it comes to time you spend working on these personalizations, um, how um, how much time do you spend on preparing one sequence or one cadence, or how does it work on your end?
Yeah. So again, most of the time comes in the back end. So I'll create like a saved search, as they call it, in Sales Navigator that shows me the criteria of like, hey, ping me once a week whenever there's a new VP of sales in this territory, right? This is my territory. So the time doesn't take too much, right? And then I'll take that group of people and then we use Zoom info and I literally just export them right into the Cadence. So
Mhm.
it really doesn't take too much time. It's all really done on the back end with the searches you create in Sales Navigator. And
Mhm.
again, I go into depth on that in some of my archived posts. But that's pretty much the time. And then again, when I'm going to send out those emails, it doesn't take that much time because you know exactly what you have to personalize to, and it's just that trigger. So like you're just referencing their previous company, or you're just saying how much they've grown over the last couple of months. So it's like one piece that you really have to personalize. But if you want to personalize more, I don't want to spend more than 5 minutes max. If it's like if they're active on LinkedIn, I'll dig into their posts. I'll try to find a good piece. But if I can't find anything and it's been like 5 minutes, I'll just send the email with the trigger reference and I'll move on to the next.
Got it. Got it. So, and maybe a few more questions. We have a few minutes here.
Yeah.
Um, from your experience, what is the difference between like a typical cold outreach sequence with no personalization, with no like relevancy, and your personalized sequence? What's the difference? Maybe like you can share a number approximately.
Yeah. I guess I can't say I have specific numbers, but like we've done it before with like really low tier accounts, or maybe like at Pandadoc, we sell to a lot of different verticals, a lot of different industries, right? Software is our main one, but we can get into other ones as well. So maybe I'll create like a generic cadence, just focus on one industry. And the reply rates aren't great. It might be like 1 to 2%, but we'll book most of those meetings off of the phone call. Um, but then compared to like one of these personalized cadences, the reply rates are usually like 5+%, 7, 8. We're getting a lot more responses. So yeah, I mean, there are some situations where I'll do just generic, completely automated, not much personalization with the cadences. Again, I do that for like usually the bottoms up approach. Um, but the reply rates are pretty drastically different when you use the triggers and a little bit more customized.
Cool. All right then. I guess it was an amazing presentation, amazing topic, which is again one of my favorite ones. I
Yeah.
believe. So being an SDR myself, that is something that helps boost reply rates. That's for sure. Personalization is a new cool. All right then. Super happy to have you with us, Jet, and have a wonderful day, I guess.
Thank you, William. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for listening. Feel free to connect with
And
me on
bye.
LinkedIn.